Welcome everyone to another edition of the biweekly webinar series D&I One-on-One. Today we're talking about disability and why we shouldn't be defining people based on their different ability. My name is Jina Etienne. I'm a certified diversity executive centered on something called fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. I develop trainings and workshops, as well as facilitate conversations and programs focused on helping participants connect mindfulness and self-awareness to their daily actions and words to help foster that feeling of inclusion and belonging in organizations, that psychological safety where people feel comfortable showing up as their authentic, genuine, imperfect selves. I shifted to this work almost 10 years ago after a 20+ year career in public accounting. I am a CPA, no longer practice as Joining me today, my guest is Montreece Payton-Hardy. Montreece is a staunch advocate for disability inclusions, disability rights, and advocacy. She was diagnosed as blind in 2019. And today she's a writer. She's, I want to say, I don't think I had this written down, Montreece specifically, but we met. When did we meet?
We were connected. We were connected through a mutual acquaintance who I actually met on LinkedIn, and that was Lindsay Madison-Sook.
Ah, Lindsay, that is correct. Thank you. Lindsay joined me last fall to do a session on understanding people with different abilities and why it's important for us to be able to connect, work with, train, educate, and communicate with people. Her brother had a learning disorder and as a result was treated a little bit differently. So she's passionate about that. So thank you for reminding me. So Montreece, today, this conversation came up because you and I were talking in that very first time that we met about some of the challenges around disability in the workplace and why disability inclusion seems to be the least included dimension of diversity in many organizations, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So before we go any further, though, I would like to start with our very first polling question because we're going to be talking a lot about this. So Autumn, if we can launch this one, are you familiar with workplace accommodations?
Yes, that poll is live on your screen.
Great, thank you so much. So the way this is going to work is over the course of the next hour, we have 3 more polling questions that we're going to ask you all. And we invite you to answer them. Prefer not to answer is always going to be an option. But one of the things we find helpful, especially for the questions that we put in here as a polling question, is it gives us some context for our conversation in terms of where our audience is, where the participants are, as it relates to the topic at the time we launch the polling question. So I just want to encourage people to answer those questions as if you're comfortable.
Thank you so much. Getting ready to close this poll down in 3, 2, and 1, sharing those results with you. So 41% led with yes, 39% someone familiar, and 16% not familiar.
So this is great news. Now, before we also go on, let me do one last thing. I've turned on closed captioning. I haven't been doing that for many of our webinars, and I realized, oops, on my part, especially from an inclusive perspective, this gives everybody an opportunity.
Jina, it looks like the poll is stuck on your screen. Do you see that on yours?
No, I cannot.
Okay, I'm going to repass you the presenter controls.
Okay.
Sometimes it does that with just like after a poll. Okay, you should see that pop up again.
We good?
Perfect, thank you.
Folks, today is technical difficulties day, but we are going to get through it.
Yes, let us press on.
Let us press on. So let's start, Montreece, with the question I always like to ask my guests, which is, And I think I know the answer, but why are you so passionate and really open to talking about this today in such a public way?
Well, first, let me start with saying hello to everyone. And again, my name is Montreece Payton-Hardy. I want to also start by describing myself, as that's how I normally kick off all of my speaking engagements. I am an African-American woman wearing clear-framed glasses, curly dark hair, a gold top, and a black blazer. And the reason why I use descriptions when I'm speaking virtually is because I am consistently thinking about being inclusive of those with blindness and visual impairment, otherwise known as the BVI community. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to, and I was very excited about the opportunity to present this information with you and have this conversation with you, Jina, is because many may not necessarily be aware of the challenges that those who identify as disabled have within the workplace. And so also wanted to just shift some perspectives on ideas of what living with disability is like as a professional, and give some ideas about how others can be allies. What does that look like? And what are the best ways to have conversations with those in our workplaces who may be living with disability? And really, I may sound very proper right now, and that is just because that's how I tend to start. But when I am in a one-on-one conversation with people, I let them know, hey, we are all going to make mistakes, including myself, and that is okay. Let's just talk. Let's hash some things out. Be willing to make mistakes and just learn and be curious. And I've found that that is one of the best ways to have these types of conversations.
Someone actually shared in here, they said they're missing a toe due to diabetes, and whether they should bring that up during a job interview. Now, normally I don't go to questions so soon, but you talked about it's going to be okay, we're going to make mistakes, but really about accepting all of us where we are and how we are. So can we just jump in, or how comfortable are you with talking about that right at the get-go?
Oh, I'm 100% comfortable with that. Would you mind if I just take a stab at answering the question?
Absolutely. And folks, please put your questions in. We'll get to them throughout the program and certainly toward the end in our Q&A session if we can.
So I know that there's a slide on disclosure, but ultimately for that particular person, first of all, thank you for being candid, because you did not have to. And that is the gist of the answer as well. You do not have to. It is up to you if and when you decide to disclose any information in regards to your disability. Can it be helpful for you? It sincerely depends. And if your job is contingent upon anything physical, where where your missing appendage could potentially impact you, and you feel you need to have that conversation, then by all means, you should feel comfortable enough to do so. However, it is really up to you. Most people weigh in and try to figure out, should I mention it during the hiring process, right after I've been hired, well into the work? It 100% depends on your experience, what your comfortability is with disability, having those conversations, and then also if it's going to impact the work that you're doing. Really quickly also, for me personally, I have been on the train of thought where I want to talk about it up front, but that also spoke to the organizations that I was originally looking to work with for my full-time work as of about a year ago. I wanted to work with organizations that were more than performative when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusive work. And I figured if I was looking specifically for a company that had that type of focus, they were not performative, it was built into their pillar and values, then I should be able to have that conversation up front. And within my first phone interview, I started having those conversations, and it led to being at the great place where I am today with the organization that I work for and support. So that was something that worked out for me. It depends from person to person and from organization to organization. I'd be very happy to have one-on-one conversations with anyone who has questions like this and could use a little bit of a soundboard.
So I'm putting back up and remind everyone that on the bottom of both of our slides with our bios on them are contact information. And so Montreece has just gracefully said that she's willing to have conversations. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. You can send her an email, and that can be a nice way to do some follow-up. Now, I want to start with, we asked the very first question about whether people were familiar, and we had almost 20%, I think it was 16% said they weren't familiar, and several were somewhat familiar. So can you talk a little bit about what an accommodation is? Because we know employers are required to be able to make them, but I think there's a lot of myth and misunderstanding about what they are.
Absolutely. So I'll actually just go off of what we have here, which I really appreciate right now. Reasonable accommodations, especially according to ADA or the Americans with Disabilities Act, which will be 33 years old in about 10 days, and super exciting. And for those who did not know, July is oh my gosh, I just lost it. But it's Disability Pride Month. It is Disability Pride Month. We have another month as well in October, and I was thinking about that one, and that is National Disabled Employees Awareness Month. So a couple of awareness months out there. Nevertheless, ADA notes that reasonable accommodation is any change to the application or hiring process, to the job, the way a job is done, or the way a work environment that allow the person with a disability who is qualified for the job to perform their essential functions of that job and enjoy equal employment opportunities. Accommodations are considered reasonable if they do not create an undue hardship or a direct threat, and that in itself is something that is, let's just say that it is debatable, and it ranges from organization to organization. And so myths around accommodations or what reasonable accommodations are. One, for example, a reasonable accommodation is being able to even work from home, having the flexibility to work from home, having flexible work hours. Everything from even like furniture that you're using for your job, what is that called? An ergonomically correct chair, different types of software you may need for your screen. Like I use introverted colors and so forth, or high contrast colors and different things of that nature, and being allowed to do so. All of these things help with the functionality of my work. Thank you, Jina, for pulling up that example as well. So there's noted there the equipment change, the usage of service animals, and that would more often be for those facing blindness or visual impairment, but also emotional support animals and so on, and especially when you work remotely, like that comes in handy. And alternative formats to a number of different types of documents and video formats and so on for conference calls, etc. Those are all considered roughly reasonable accommodations. I believe you did have another question there, Jina, about something. I feel like I missed the question that you did.
No, don't worry. There are no other active questions in the queue.
Okay.
So interesting. We had this is what always happens on these webinars. I meet with the guest, we talk about the conversation, and then the conversation goes someplace different. And so I want to back up. First of all, there is a slide later on if we don't actually show it there. Everyone should please download the handout, because on one of the pages we have a list of actual different tools that people can think about. They're just an example because the list goes on and on and on. But I think one of the reasons I wanted to be able to jump around, well, first of all, you just said something about contrast. And we specifically created this slide. So there's information in here, We're not going to walk through it specifically, but I wanted to show it because you all hopefully can see simply looking at the screen that the strain on our eyes is, I would say, diminished. And it made me think maybe I should always be using a background like this. It changes some of the different dynamics for many of us to think about when we're doing either presentations in our offices. If anybody has ever heard of that saying, rising tides lift all ships, I think that's the saying. When you create a tool, a resource, or support that helps a subset, a minority in an organization, you pretty much help everybody. You talked about flexible work schedules. We're all benefiting from that, even if it might be considered an accommodation for somebody with a disability. Closed captioning. Right now I have subtitles, but did you all know today on Zoom for free, you can turn on closed captioning in real time, not for everyone else to see, but for you to see. And how many people, if only I had a show of hands, use closed captioning while they're watching television? These are examples of accommodations that have been made that all of us benefit from. And so that's something to think about in terms of accommodation, because it's not just something to help someone with a disability. While it is that at a minimum, it's also something that can benefit many of us.
Absolutely. If I may jump in here real quick too, two things came to mind. I've heard people who do not identify as disabled when watching Netflix or Hulu say, I cannot hear if the captions are not on. So I completely understand that. And I'm sure there are many out there who do. What is it? It's just something that's become universally helpful. Another thing about Zoom is that I'm not sure if everyone has noticed this, but when you go into your settings now, there is an option for every time you set up a link or room to request a sign language interpreter. That is a real and actual feature within Zoom, and I am so glad that they have made something like that available. But there are plenty of other options as well. There are so many. I can think of the names of a couple of different sign language interpreters who support for meetings and so on available on LinkedIn and so on. And I am full of these types of resources and excited to help anyone with connecting with that if one was to find that that level of support could be helpful in meetings. But to have that built into how businesses execute their meetings and overall conferences, conventions, especially when they're virtual, but of course, even when they're in person, obviously, to just make sure that all of these different options are available, regardless of whether we know there are people in the audience who specifically need it. That is what more of these conversations are about. Just doing it because it is right. It is equitable for everyone's learning experience and working experience. So I just wanted to hit on that while you were there. What is it? And also, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Before you keep going, I want to make sure that we're pacing our polling questions throughout. So I want to go ahead and open this one up. Do you know anyone at work with an invisible disability? And you just said something, Montreece, that got me thinking about this. You know, organizations, companies, venues can be creating supports, whether you know anybody or not. And so many, 70% of disabilities, it's estimated, are invisible, meaning 70 out of 100 of us have a disability that someone can't see. And there are a lot of things that will fall into that category. So why not try to serve the largest population, and they don't have to tell us about it? There's a gentleman who said in the comments, foreign accents, that he often uses closed captioning. Another person said that they can help where English isn't their primary language. Curb cut effect is what she was talking about, and I think I've talked about that in some previous conversation. So let's see where we are on the poll. I think it's about to close.
Yes, getting ready to close that one down in 3, 2, and 1. I'll share those results here for you. So 42% said yes, 33% no, 17% I think so.
So what's 33 and 17? 7 plus 3 is 10, carry the 1, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's half. I'm a CPA, but I can't do math. I'm just saying. Half of the people that are with us today either aren't sure or don't know anybody with an invisible
Well,
disability.
can I jump in right there?
Please.
So
Yeah.
I think, first of all, there many times what I have been running into, even in the past 3 days. So many people don't even know what an invisible disability is. And just to give an idea, and this is not an exhaustive list that I'm going to name, it's just to paint a picture. But invisible disabilities can include neurodivergence, and that sounds like a $50 word, but that in itself is ultimately capturing those who identify as people with ADHD, ADD, being
Dyslexia.
ASD or having ASD and being on the autism spectrum disorder. What is it? Bipolar. Those who identify as having bipolarism. And those are just a few ideas. Also, to the majority of you, I'm sure even I appear as a person who did not necessarily live with blindness, and my disability can be considered as invisible until you see me in person with my cane trying to avoid running into walls. So it sincerely depends. Blindness can, deafness in itself can also. It just sincerely depends on one's experience of a person, and which perspective you're experiencing them from, where you cannot necessarily tell that they are living with disability. They don't necessarily, use a wheelchair or a cane of any sort. And I hope that clarifies that a little bit for those who may have been wondering.
So it got me thinking about this slide because in our planning, we were talking about people might have a visible disability, certainly an invisible disability. I think so for those who don't have a disability, I want to invite you to think about something about yourself. It could be an accent. It could be a certain type of favorite type of food. It could be anything that you might not want other people to know about you. This isn't just about disability. It is quite common for all of us to hide or cover something about ourselves. The challenge we have here is that with a disability, sometimes there's a stigma around disability. We actually have a slide on that. I encourage you to look at it if we don't have an opportunity to show it here. Because of that stigma, Montreece, you just talked about it. You might opt to not use a cane or an assistive device like that because people will tag you as somebody with a disability. And we know when somebody's tagged with having a disability, there's a higher likelihood that disability means impaired ability, diminished ability. And we know that is not true. So hiding in plain sight is something that you talked about. People will take all kinds of measures to compensate so they don't have to ask for an accommodation or some other way reveal a disability.
Absolutely. So I actually want to go through this slide because I really appreciate that you pulled this up. This is just accounting for just a couple of examples of what the experience could look like for your colleagues or employees who are living with disability. As a person who lives with blindness and visual impairment, I have myself masked by not using my mobility cane, primarily because if I am at a company retreat or an in-person meeting, most people, as soon as they see me with my cane, they think that they need help, or they instantly, like there's an instant thought that I need support. If I'm using my cane and I run into a table, that just indicates to me to go around it. That's the whole point of a mobility cane. Whereas when others see that, they're thinking, oh my gosh, let me jump to the rescue, and then instantly grab my elbow. These are real experiences. Yeah. No asking, just jump in and do it. And so there are times when, especially depending on what it is I'm doing, where I am, if I'm trying to network and so on, where I may arrive 20 minutes earlier than everyone else just so that I can navigate the space, know where to go, and then not use my cane so that I can avoid that entire experience. That's one reason, and that's just me. And there are others who have different reasons for why they may or may not. Why they may mask and not use their mobility cane. Using behind-the-scenes apps to provide, let me see. I think that looks a little bit different, but to provide. So, for example, there are different apps that are available on the phone for those with blindness and visual impairment, and it may just look to anyone else like someone like myself is just using the phone out in public or in a meeting, when I'm actually using that app to magnify what it is that I'm seeing, or it's connected, potentially, it could be connected to an earpiece that I'm using, and it's reading to me something out loud. It's taking pictures. There's different apps like Be My Eyes and so on that are taking pictures of what's around me and then describing these things to me. Looks like I'm just using my phone to everyone else, but for me, it's an additional way for me to take in the environment without asking someone else. Or asking for assistance, because the more one has to ask for assistance, the more they may feel there's a possibility that they'll be judged, or there'll be some sort of bias or prejudice.
That might contribute to the stigma of she's constantly help, so she must help.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you've seen this. I wish I had the title, but there's this beautiful TED Talk. And if anyone listening knows the title of it, please put it in the Q&A. She has a series of chairs on the stage, and she talks about when we sit in each of the chairs and shift our perspective a little bit, we can start to appreciate other people's experiences. And what you were talking about on the phone reminded me, because she invited, I think it was like her soon-to-be daughter-in-law to go to this concert, and she kept looking at her daughter-in-law who was on the phone. And she just got frustrated because she's not sharing this wonderful experience. And then when the break came, her daughter-in-law shows her she had been posting about how beautiful this experience was, and she had been taking selfies, and she was just talking about the venue, and she learned that she was enjoying the concert in a very different way. And so to your point, we make assumptions about people because they ask for help, or to your point, looking at their cell phone. I would invite people to try this, by the way. Open your, what is this app called on my iPhone? It's probably there's the normal one, Notes. So just for fun, I'm not saying that you have to do it right now, but when you have a moment, open Notes and turn on the microphone and then start talking. And what you will see is it is a easy way to get closed captioning, for example, because whatever's being spoken in the room starts to show up in text on your app. And that's something that your colleague could be doing, and it doesn't require special software. We have to be quick to not make judgments. And there was also something I wanted to share. I saw another TED Talk, and a woman was in a wheelchair, and she was saying she went to the mall. And as she's coming out of the mall, a woman goes up to her and says, "You know, I'm so inspired by you." And she thought to herself, because I went to the mall?
Yes.
That means you are already assuming that just me navigating my life is so hard, so that you get to do it. You're so amazing. And you're like, it's my life. You're diminishing me. And so I can see that that's resonating, because you are nodding your head.
You know what's really interesting? So, and I don't mean anything by this, but it is a constant part of the experience of walking through life and living it very differently with disability, and not any worse, just differently. And it's actually been quite exciting. Nevertheless, when others see, occasionally you get the person who also just wanted to, yes, they feel inspired by you, or like others automatically assume that you really, really, really need help. And so it's avoiding our own biases as best we possibly can, or just asking questions out of curiosity before taking any action. That's going to be really, really helpful in and really getting to know more people who are living with and working with disabilities. It's going to be super, super helpful, because asking those questions and hearing people's different experiences it's going to be mind blowing. One other thing I wanted to note really quickly is that disability is an entire spectrum, and it is not always constant. So you have those who have invisible or visible disabilities that are episodic, and they'll have pain that can nearly have them in the bed for half a day, but then the next day they're completely fine. And that is something that may not necessarily be predictable. With my particular situation with blindness and glaucoma, incredibly advanced glaucoma, I have something that's called glaucoma headaches. These are about 10 times worse than a migraine. It has been maybe a good 3 months or so, though, since I've had one. And it can be triggered by stress. I don't ever know when these are going to hit, but when they do, this just means that everything has to pause for me. And so, an accommodation, actually working my way back to that really quickly, but an accommodation, pardon me, that's appropriate for something like that I deal with is being able to work from home and to know, you know what, I can put pause, I can push pause on everything, let someone know that I'll be stepping away from my computer, put up a little note that says I'm away, and then lie down and close off everything and be in my space where I can heal for a bit, and then jump back into the work. But it does also help that I'm able to advocate for myself and have these conversations with HR staff and my direct supervisors and different ones to let them know that this may be something that I might need to do every once in a while, but I have a plan also to make sure that work is getting done.
So it's interesting because there are a lot of the tools we have. I believe Microsoft has this. I know Zoom has it. So I don't know if people realize this, but on Zoom, you actually can enter your contacts directly in Zoom, message people in Zoom, chat with people in Zoom. Not a lot of people do it. We all don't need yet another place to chat or instant message. But I share that because in many of these tools, you can indicate that you're away. And so someone can look at your profile. Now, this takes a cultural change. This is a mindset shift where everyone in the organization learns to use it and honor it. But were that the case, if you just turn the setting to say, I'm away, and then they know, oh, she's away from her desk right now. It helps you from having to tell anybody anything. The fewer barriers that we can put up, that you don't now have to jump over a bunch of hurdles just to be on the same footing as the rest of us. That's the whole point of an accommodation. What we want to do is, we're not doing something quote unquote special for you. What we're doing is taking away a barrier to level the playing field. And the way I like to think of an accommodation is it's giving someone the support they need to give them an equal chance at the same outcome.
Oh, Jina, have you seen that image? I wish we had that. Have you seen an image about equity where it's an image that shows two sides, what equality looks like versus what equity looks like? Are you familiar with the image that I'm describing, with three people looking over a fence?
Yeah, and I use one that shows two images of a start line on a track side by side. One of them is the straight start line where everybody starts on the same line and just goes running. But the other one shows the staggered start. And, you know, if somebody didn't know anything about track meets, you see the starting line where position 2 is a little further ahead than position 1. Position 3 is a little further ahead than position 2. And you're like, that is not fair, because if the person in 2, they have a head start against the person in lane 1. But that's not true. The reason that you have these different starting positions is when you look at the curvature of a track, the outside lane is actually longer than the inside lane. And so by moving the start line forward in each of the lanes as you move outward, what that does in these longer races is it means from that start point to the finish line is the exact same distance. So sameness doesn't mean fairness.
Right. And that is a good example. I really, really like this image. So for equality, it shows 3 people. One, let's just to paint the picture in our minds. One is where a person is standing there. Let's say that person is 6 feet tall. The next person is about 4 feet tall. And the next person is about 2 feet tall. They're all given a box that is the exact same height to look over.
I'm going to try to find it, by the way, Montreece, while you're talking. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Okay, that would be super great. It's equality versus equity. And so so every person is given a box that is the same height, and they're all trying to look over a fence to look at a baseball game being played. Well, the person that is 6 feet tall, do they really need a box that is the exact same height as the person who is 2 feet tall? And the person who is 2 feet tall can't see over the fence, by the way. Then on the other side, you have the picture of what equity looks like, which is where the person who is 2 feet tall, they have a box, but it's really, really tall, and they are able to see over the fence. The person who is 6 feet tall, they don't even have a box because they don't need one, and they can see over the fence. And the person that's 4 feet tall, they have about a mid-sized box, and they're still also able to see over the fence as well. People are given what they need in order for them to have the same experience. And so,
is this the one, by the way, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you can see this. But this is the one, and I want to just say, those are my PowerPoint superpowers. Okay, there are a lot of different versions of these, but you can see the difference between everybody getting the same thing on the left side. Not helpful. On the right side, people are getting different supports so that everybody can get the same thing, which is to see the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of this image. Yeah.
Of course. No, I'm glad that you were able to pull it up so quickly. So while we're, at this particular point too, I just wanted to.
Sorry, I have to interrupt. I have to interrupt one more time. We need to do a polling question. Let's go ahead and launch this polling question, and then go ahead and do your comment. I'll interrupt you again when we need to wrap up the poll. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Montreece.
Okay, I think we did this one.
No, this one is, do you know anybody with a disability? So this isn't invisible. This is just anybody with a disability. So that you can, visible disabilities, you might realize that some people who didn't think they knew anybody with a disability, when you ask it this way, yes, I know somebody, because it's visible, or because they're asked for an accommodation, or because of something else, like they've revealed it.
Am I not seeing the same screen? I see the screen and it says, do you know anyone at work with an invisible disability?
Oh, wait, it does say invisible. I apologize, Jina. I couldn't see the full
so you launched
when I went to click on it, I couldn't see the full poll. So this is the invisible one. I apologize.
So they're answering the invisible again?
They did the disability one previously.
Oh, so I see. You all okay, because everybody's getting their CPE credit. And we're seeing here that maybe the numbers aren't going to be that different.
So I'm going to close this one down. And actually, they aren't very different. It's pretty closely the same. 40% yes, 31% no, 25% think so.
Okay, so it's pretty even, almost 50-50. So visible or invisible, about the same ratio of people knowing someone with a disability. So do you remember what you were saying? I'm sorry that I had to cut.
Oh man. You know what?
No, I can come up with other things.
No, I do remember. I wanted to just give a couple of statistics to give to create the idea and make sure that it's pretty clear what people who are working and living with disabilities, like some of the things that they're facing. One part of my particular experience, I think you have a slide on this as well, Jina, is that I began to experience, I'm sorry, are you catching an echo?
No, you sound fine.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I did not start experiencing disability until being an adult. It was not something that I was born with. And for more than 80% of people, especially in the US, this is the experience, that disability is something that is not experienced until potentially later in life. They're not necessarily born with disability.
Right.
And because of that in itself, there is an emotional and mental impact on people who are newly experiencing any sort of disability that many employers and colleagues do not remotely think about until you're in it yourself.
Right.
And so I just wanted to highlight that, as well as a couple of other things. Roughly 61 million people with disabilities do tend to feel like they are forgotten when it comes to being in the workforce, specifically in DEI discussions, since we were talking about equity. I also wanted to make a quick note. Oh, I'm looking for my one other statistic here. It is also noted in a couple of recent studies that among groups where inclusion is a concern, disabled workers rank their work experience as less than satisfying compared to workers without disabilities. And this is primarily because disability in itself is misunderstood, and it is also looked at with a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
Last note is that, oh gosh, I just lost my other note. But out of all of the US, there's approximately 1 in 4 people who are living or working with disabilities. And so it's something that is far more common that we are all experiencing than people know or realize. And it's something that is inevitably experienced, especially with aging alone. And so it is really, really helpful to be a part of these types of conversations. Again, be curious, ask questions, and see what we can do to partner and support one another, because we never know when something could happen to any of us or someone that we know, and how we can help. Having these experiences now and having these questions and conversations now, it will help in the long run, one way or another. So it's just about being right. Yes, the bottom line and ROI and so on, it's all important and part of the conversation. But just doing what's right for people just because it's right is definitely what I personally advocate for. And so I just wanted to make a note of that as well. Did you have another note, or was there another question?
Well,
there are quite a few questions. So
we are
hearing.
Oh, wonderful.
I don't hear it on my end, but I do have several attendees saying they're hearing it on their end.
The echo?
Yeah, the echo. It was kind of coming in and out. So I might see, Montreece, if you can mute and then unmute yourself.
Sorry about that, folks. I didn't catch that on the Q&A, but I see it now.
This is helpful.
They have an echo. Okay, now I want to remember what I was going to say. First of all, we have a slide toward the end that has some statistics that were provided by Disability:IN. And at the end of the slide deck, there are a number of resources that we've also included. So here, there's some articles that might be helpful if someone's interested in doing some reading. Montreece wrote a really great blog post that is on the Diversity Crew website, so it's there. I don't know if on those PDFs you can click the hyperlink, but you have the titles on all of these slides, so type in the title and you can find it. Disability:IN.
Does this help? I'm sorry, I'm trying to still work on the sound.
Oh, let's see.
Does that
Testing
help?
1, 2, 3. We'll wait to see if in the Q&A people come in and say whether it's there or not.
Sounds good.
And then on Disability In, it's an amazing organization that has tools and resources, advocacy, information that some might find very helpful. And then lastly, a couple of books and some other articles. This is a research paper that might be helpful just for those who want to continue their learning, because I think that it is so important to raise that awareness, because too often disability inclusion is the least included, to your point. All right, it is 3:47. We have, if we can squeeze in 10 minutes for Q&A. So can we do this? We'll try to rapid fire, like quick answers, and I'll throw out some of these questions and we'll get as far as we can. Is that okay? Some of these
Sounds
might
good.
actually be comments. Oh, so the person Donald shared, it's the 5 Chairs TED Talk. So thank you for that. Let's see. I have a colleague who uses a cane and I have questions, wanting to understand better, not sure if and how to approach. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. It's really as simple as catching them on a coffee break or something of that nature, and then just genuinely, hey, I really like to, I have some curious questions. I hope you don't mind, but please let me know if you do, and I can absolutely respect that. But I just would like to be as respectful and inclusive as possible in terms of being a colleague, and I would absolutely also like to just be supportive. What is it that I can do to support you best? If you even need any support. And then that question in itself can open some doors. Also, speaking of TED Talks, a colleague of mine, Michelle Whitman, owner of Asset Based Consulting, has a TED Talk about this exactly, and the type of question that you can ask to open these doors. And have conversations with colleagues and so on, and employees who are living with disabilities. So that's, again, Michelle Whitman. She has a TEDx talk on that.
I remembered what I was going to say. Curiosity. What I love about your comments, you've mentioned curiosity a few times, is that a saying I heard, and I've never forgotten it. I love it. You can't hate something if you're curious about it. So curiosity is so powerful. All right. Next person says, I struggle with my state for reasonable accommodations for vocational rehabilitation. Do you have any suggestions? All right, remember, we're doing rapid fire here. So we invite them to reach out to you directly by email, but please,
absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts to share here?
Yes, that's like a 2-hour conversation. So the number one top advice that I would give to anyone working with their state, and then also trying to connect them with an organization that they work with, is be persistent and be patient. Please connect with me. I am more than happy to have a chat with you on other best practices.
What are some realistic accommodations for people with ADHD? I feel like they have all the O's. So many people who do not understand just how difficult it is to live with ADHD. Wow, you seem so excited for this question, Montreece.
I am. You know why? Because
Why?
this is going to be the debut of this. So this week, I was literally on Tuesday diagnosed with ADHD officially.
I was going to say congratulations, but no, that's not. You know what? It's a question of clarity, right?
Say it again.
It's a question of clarity. It's getting validation for something you've struggled with. For some reason, when you get a name to it, it's empowering. So congratulations on your diagnosis.
It's 100% congratulations, because I knew there were two sides to this. There was something that was empowering me, that's telling me I think very differently from everybody else. Am I smarter than them? What's happening? I'm not sure. And then there were also these other times when I'm like, why am I struggling with this thing? Why can't I do the thing that I'm supposed to do? And when I found out that it's ADHD, it's okay. And now we can move forward. Couple of things. Reasonable accommodations for those who have ADHD. It's more about do you have the time to
Yeah.
train yourself on a number of different practices that are going to support some of the work that you do? I know, Jina, you can definitely pour into this as well. So I'm just going to name one thing since I'm kind of the newbie to the ADHD world. But one thing that I have done is it's been super, two things actually. Is one, I have learned that while I work remotely, and I have others who are close to me who work remotely as well, we do this little practice called body doubling. Body doubling helps us to both focus in, we have somebody else in the room. Sometimes there are days, and ADHD affects people differently, so we're very aware of that, and it's on its own spectrum as well. But in the end, short answer is body doubling helps me to know that there's somebody else in the room, there's somebody else who I can, just a breathing person there. And if I really need to ask a question or something like that, I can, but it somehow, for whatever reason, it helps me to focus. So I body double every once in a while when it comes to certain projects that I need to do, and that other person, we schedule time to do that. The other thing is Pomodoro time management, working in bursts of 25 minutes. That, oh, I don't have my timer. There are all kinds of timers that you can get for Pomodoro time management. It's working in bursts of 25 minutes and then taking 5-minute breaks. So 25 minutes you work, your bell or phone alarm or whatever, it dings. You have to set for 5 minutes. You literally take a break. It is best to walk away from your space and then come right back when that timer 5 minutes goes off and jump right back in.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why is because people with ADHD brains, they need those deadlines and a timer to keep them on point. And so at least this is something that I've learned. I hope that answers that question. I know we're on rapid fire.
Well, what I'll add to that is, thankfully, a lot of them are comments and encouragement and not questions as I read through them. I will add to that, as somebody with ADHD myself, brown noise. Did you know there's white noise, blue noise, brown noise, blue noise? There's lots of different colors of noise, and supposedly brown noise can help those with ADHD. But, explore, because that alone can help regulate all of the sounds that might be causing distractions that you're not even aware how distracted you are. And the other thing is, my calendar hack is my calendar is color coded. And I'm always worried that somebody's going to see my calendar and make fun of me. But I have something like 12 different colors on my calendar. And I know from the color what it means, and it helps me regulate my day. And stay on task, because if my calendar passes that point and I am now at 3 o'clock and I can see that I've moved into blue and I didn't finish the green, that gives me a cue and a clue. The reality of ADHD is that it manifests itself so differently for all of us. So it's not even as if what helps you or what helps me can help others. And what I would encourage whoever asked that question is to do is do some reading.
Yes.
There's a lot of information out there about ADHD so that you can find and sync up with the way it manifests for you. And then based on that, look for tools and resources. So,
in addition to that, to more directly answer their question too about accommodations specifically, this is where if you don't already work for an organization where you have the option to work hybrid or work from home, that accommodation comes in handy. Because
as well as permission to use noise canceling headphones
is
a really simple one. Because they just might need to give you permission to use your own.
Exactly.
They don't need to provide them, but that's a simple example of something that you can ask for. By the way, before you keep going, I want to keep the conversation. So, Autumn, maybe we open that fourth polling question so that we can keep talking through the poll. We probably have another minute or two, Montreece. How about this? One, I want to remind everybody, your contact information is there. I know you were an open book. You were so vulnerable with us today, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you for that. And invite people to follow up with you directly. And if they don't have your contact information, whatever, mine is there, reach out to me and I'm happy to loop her in and forward it to you. We want to be a resource for you. These webinars, the whole point of the series is to just raise awareness a little bit at a time from a personal experience perspective around D&I and the way it shows up for all of us. And so, Montreece, I'm going to give you the last word as this poll closes up. And then Autumn, You can tell us when we need to stop talking.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. Now, first of all, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to connect with this group and share my story. And ultimately, my encouragement to all is to see people first for who they are and for the value that they bring, especially to your work environment, their leadership, their voice, hear their voices before, if as best you possibly can, before um, their ability. Also, I wanted to encourage that with July being Disability Pride Month, again, there's another opportunity for celebration, learning more, creating more awareness, and that's October, and that is National Disabled Employees Awareness Month, or NDEAM. It's a great, great time. I mean, of course, it should be happening year round, but it's a great time to get some speakers in, people who are actual speakers and leaders with disabilities. Those would be my encouragements to help create belonging in your working environment and inclusivity through recognizing those who may be working with disabilities. So thank you again. This was
Yeah.
really, really fun.
Thank you. Thank you.